afternoon, how are you? Fantastic, good. All right, welcome to the Michael Weinert series, Entrepreneurship Lecture Series. Today we're welcoming Justin McCullough. We'll talk about his history, a little brief background about him, and we'll get things started. So, pleased to welcome special guest, Mr. Justin McCullough, right over there. We're going to come out and shout. Okay. Justin has 20 years experience in business development, B2B marketing, and entrepreneurial leadership. Justin began his career with a BBA right here at Lamar University in MIS in 2002, so not very long ago, right?
That's right.
Shortly after graduating, he formed his first company called Turning Minds Media, managing web services for small to medium-sized businesses. He later served as Chief Operations Officer at Agama Advertising before his role eventually as Vice President of Operations at AmeriCommerce right here in Beaumont, Texas, which is an e-commerce software system which was eventually sold to Capital One recently. Today, Justin serves as Chief Information and Product Officer at Faculty Solutions Group, FGS, one of the nation's largest single-source providers of lighting and electrical products. He also runs the IoT and Smart Buildings division. Please join me in welcoming Justin McCullough.
So thank you so much for that. So he's pretty much covered my career. I don't know that there's a whole lot more to say than that, unless you're my mom. My mom always cares about all the things I've ever done. But I do want to talk to you guys about some things that have been instrumental in my career arc. And I want to try to impart some things that I've learned along the way that I think would be valuable to you. Some of that may be in the context of my jobs and my past roles and things like that, but a lot of it has, I think, more to do with what can be applied in the workforce as you guys move forward. So I'm curious, who here is currently running a business or in a startup? One? Who here wants to run a business or do a startup? Maybe 7, 10? Okay. Who is afraid of going into business? You want to hide in the shadows? Okay, good. So we have College of Business people here. This is good. So I was an MIS major. In fact, Dr. Barnes made an impact on me, as well as several others whenever I was coming through. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what I do today. I am at Facility Solutions Group, which is a $750 million company. We have branches all over the United States, primarily in construction, electrical service, and lighting. Kind of boring stuff. I'm not a construction person, but if you've been in this area, obviously you have some familiarity with refineries, the construction environment, what it takes to be successful in sort of that very physical space. When I came into FSG, I came in as Chief Product Officer with the mandate to essentially drive the company forward as an innovation group. So a lot of what I do is from the impact of how can we inspire and innovate our customers in an industry that is not as technology savvy as they really need to be. And so as a result of that effort, I have the development team that is really sort of forward-looking, forward-facing for the company. We develop the software IP that is the kind of the future foundation of the business. And a lot of that software is directly instrumental to what is known as the Smart Buildings division. So Smart Buildings ultimately is just like in your residential where you have Alexa and you're controlling your house lights and your air conditioner through Alexa. We kind of do the same thing in a commercial enterprise environment, and we develop software called Chariot, so you can do lighting control, HVAC control, large high-rise buildings, retail buildings. So some of our customers are like Verizon Retail, where they have 1,200 businesses in our software product where we're doing that kind of management. So very much still a technology person. Dr. Barnes asked me if I'm still doing technology work, and I actually have to say I'm probably not doing technology work. I'm not a developer anymore. I am really more in the leadership, vision casting, innovation, managing teams, managing the P&L, really trying to grow the business, deal making, things like that. So that covers this portion here of what I do today. Software is definitely a big part of what we do though. And then formerly I was in e-commerce. Really enjoyed that, definitely helping small businesses. And in my heart, I have always loved small businesses and helping people be successful. So that's kind of the through line of what I've been doing over my career. So I guess today I'm here because I'm success. I don't believe I've arrived yet, but I thank Lamar for telling me I've arrived to some degree to come to talk to you guys. It's taken 20 years to get here. I'll take it. My mom's happy. My wife is happy. But I don't think I've arrived, but I do think that there's some things here that will help you on your journey. And so one thing that's been key to me is this path of like slow and steady is the race. There's a clear pathway. We're going to be successful if we just do the work. It's kind of step by step. That's kind of what we think and what we expect. But in reality, it looks a lot different. Your career path is not nearly as easy as you want it to be, and that's okay. So if you guys have had challenges already in your career, maybe you're young in your career or even older in your career, this is normal. A lot of people go through this. But what's important is really how you navigate those spaces and the person that you become along the way. So I want to talk to you a little bit about changing that perspective of, I want to be successful, I want to have like an overnight success situation, into, I want to embrace this reality. I want to be the kind of person who's comfortable with hardship. I want to be the kind of person who's comfortable with setbacks. I want to be the kind of person who's comfortable not getting what I want when I want. And that's hard. And so to do that, really have to think a little bit differently about what's happening in the workplace, what's happening in your startup, your future startup, or the business that you want to go into, whether or not it's a Fortune 100 company, which I've been fortunate enough to work for, or if it's been a startup where you're bootstrapping it, which I've also done that too. So they're both unpleasant, just different ways, but they also have great rewards. So for those that are interested in kind of what I'm about over time, I don't have a resume for you or a LinkedIn profile, but this is kind of the gist of it. I've been in a lot of different places over the 20 years. I've played a lot of different roles. One of the things that's fascinating, I think, is I've always identified as a technology person. And early in my career, I was a developer. And I actually thought that I was a developer until I started hiring real developers. So if we have any real developers in the room, where are you? Anybody? A real developer? Okay, well, you need to find, all y'all need to find some real developers, because it changed my life. So once I realized I wasn't a real developer, I got more into what I needed to be doing in my career, because I thought being a developer was necessary. Now, that's in the 90s and early 2000s, so landscape's different today. But nevertheless, find a developer. There's a huge demand on this technology being in every business. Being able to speak technology, though, is a big part of it. So what I found that was fascinating is this one bar here, is I've been in sales and marketing all my life. So turns out if you can communicate well, and you actually care about people, and pretend to care about people, and bring value, you can go really far in life. So I want to help you with something. If you're taking notes, just write down kind of down the middle. I'm either in operations, and I'm on the cost side of the business, or I'm in sales and marketing, and I'm on the growth side of the business. If you get on the growth side of the business, you're going to have a lot of opportunity. If you get on the cost side of the business, you got to have a lot of discipline. You can make up for lack of discipline in growth. But when you're doing cost containment strategies, when you're doing operations, if you're a COO type, and I've been there before, it's very difficult because you have to have a lot of rigor in that process. So you got to decide, am I a growth person or an operations person? Two totally different kind of personalities and personas. So I've been able to do a lot of things though, and been with my wife since 1996. She decided she did want to marry me after I graduated. I guess that was the litmus test. And I like Lamar so much, I was here for 6 years. And I'm okay with that. And any of you guys out here, you should be okay with that too. So let me show you this here. My clicker doesn't quite do what I want it to do. So I mentioned earlier about the reality of your situation. And I've gone through a lot of personal challenges, and so I had to pick a few that I wanted to share with you. Hope you don't mind, but I kind of get the highlights here. 3 hurricanes, pretty big deal. 2005, my wife was pregnant, 8 months pregnant with my first son, Mason, and that hurricane came, destroyed my business. That was we were a startup, we had about 11 employees at the time. We all evacuated. I did not recover from it. And I had a small acquisition with AmeriCommerce. For those of you that know, I sold my customer base. I was able to keep the IP in that negotiation to AmeriCommerce. So took care of the customers, they moved on, ultimately took care of my wife, took care of my kid, and I relocated, and that's what got me into Agama advertising, which was noted at the beginning. So I've had some of those kind of hardships that are external. I didn't like college algebra, but I tried it out 6 times. Ironically, business stats and business calculus were A and B subjects for me, so it really was something about algebra. It was a mental thing, but I didn't let it stop me. And in fact, in the end, my last 2 attempts at college algebra I just walked straight up to the professor and said, I know everything about the first 3 chapters. I'm going to do good. I'm going to do really good. Don't let that fool you. I suck at this class. I'm going to need help, and I need your help. So it almost worked with Dr. Peterson. She almost helped me all the way through. And what I mean by that is she said, Justin, all you have to do is make a 43 in your final exam, and you're going to be set. I was like, perfect. I did a 28. So, you know, made it all the way through on that one. But I'm okay with that. Anyway, there's a bunch of failed ideas in there, and one of the big things that I think resonates big time now is debt. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I'm going to feel like a lot of us would raise our hand today about some sort of debt, whether that's college debt, personal debt, credit card debt, whatever else. I had a small whoopsie in my business, and in about 90 days, I got $100,000 in debt. Part of that was with a printer, on a printer job that didn't go right. Customer backed out, and I love my customers. Big part of having success in business is picking good customers, but sometimes you just can't read the tea leaves, and you don't know what to expect. So I got saddled with a bunch of debt, impacted my business, impacted my family. It can happen to any of you guys, but you got to move through those situations. So the other side of that, though, is what do the achievements look like? I personally believe if you're the kind of sort of ambitious, and ambitious doesn't mean type A, right? And it doesn't mean you're an extrovert. Ambitious means you want to make an impact, right? If you're the kind of person that wants to make an impact, I would suggest if you think about creating outcomes, making artifacts, just like the archaeologists dig up artifacts. What are your artifacts? What are the things that you're leaving behind in your legacy? Those will be the milestones or the hallmarks when you look backwards that showcase what it is that you're doing in your career, where you're going, what you care about. Okay, so in my case, I've been very interested in saying yes to a lot of opportunities. So I've had the opportunity to do a couple of inventions. I've had an opportunity to do a Kickstarter that was related to an invention. Did a bunch of e-commerce sites, and actually did 6 online platforms. So 2 of them were e-commerce related, one of them was a communications platform, and what I'm doing today at Smart Buildings is an IoT platform. So these are massive, you know, I'm going to say millions of lines of code, but I'll say thousands of lines of code, all living in the cloud to provide some value, right? So a lot of people don't have those experiences to have those opportunities to build these kinds of things. But I think the artifacts matter. And if you want to think about where you're going, just look at the artifacts you're producing, because that'll help you see what value you create and generate. Be the kind of person that gets things done. That's been a hallmark to my success. I think another part of it is, I want to talk to you about some frameworks. It took me a while to trust process because I was doing a lot of things through sheer force. In my 20s, and I think probably a lot of here in the 20s, it was all about me. It was about what I could do. It was about my own skills and capabilities. You know, so basically, you can't do it, get out of the way. I'll do it. So I worked 100 hours a week, you know, and I took credit for a lot of it, and I just kind of brute forced my way through it. Well, that didn't last very long, and in fact, the hurricane in 2005 was the first kind of slap that said, hey, you can't keep thinking that it's all about you, right? Because I wound up having a lot more fragile organization than I realized with my 11 employees. So one of the key frameworks that I think is relevant today is Scrum, using Agile or Agile Scrum. The reason I think Scrum is important, and in Smart Buildings, I have 60 employees, and so our sales and marketing team is using Scrum, our service call center team is using Scrum, our projects team is using Scrum, and our development team is using Scrum. The reason it's so important, and the reason I want to really push this for you guys, is you don't have to be a software company to use Scrum, but Scrum creates an environment where everybody understands common language around process. You have a backlog, you have things that are prioritized, you're sprinting for a certain period of time, 1 to 4 weeks, to accomplish a clear outcome. So when you're trying to drive your business forward, whether it's your startup or if you're in a department, if you move it to Scrum principles, everybody now starts to understand what's most important, why, and how to work on it. So I'm not going to teach about Scrum today, but this is the typical map of Scrum, of what a sprint looks like, what the interval is, and you get to determine what that 1, 2, 3, 4 week sprint looks like. But basically everybody is mission focused for that period of time. And that's called sprint because you're sprinting and then you start all over again, you sprint again. So in our organization, we talk about 52 weeks in a year. Every week counts. As a result, I was able to double the revenue in FSG in the first 2 years I was there with principles like this. Not because I'm that smart, but because we start to really get more serious in how we manage our resources how we prioritize what we're going to say no to so that we can get better at saying yes to things. Dr. Barnes helped me with this 20 years ago. It was presented specifically in a good way to do an interview. And so there was a whole session around it. You guys, who already knows the STAR method? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people here. What I love about this is since a lot of you don't, I'll walk you through this. When your interviewer says, hey, you want to be a leader, or you want to be a developer, or you want to be a finance associate, whatever it is, but you don't have the career history for it, your resume doesn't show it, help me understand why you're the right candidate for it. You use STAR to get you there in that conversation. So you take something that's associated and you say, look, I know that you're looking at me right now for this financial role, this accounting role, whatever it is. Here's what I've done in my personal finances. Here was the situation at hand. Me and my wife had to plan a wedding. We had to do these things. It was going to cost this much. And that was our total situation. So it's a big deal. It's really important. A lot of people involved. But what I had to do from a task standpoint was line out all of our credit cards that we can save on, put a plan together for the next 6 months. We were eating beanies and weenies and macaroni, and we were making these things work. And ultimately, through saving strategy and these kinds of actions, the outcome was we were able to 100% plan for our wedding, and it was whatever, $10,000, and we didn't use any financing for it. And I was inspired by that, and I want to help other people do the same thing. So that's why I want to be your junior accounting department person, or what, right? So that's how you use STAR for an interview. I use STAR whenever I'm coaching and mentoring my people to think about it in the context of what are we doing in the business? What's the project? What's the initiative? And if we run it through STAR, we can frame the initiative so that we can see it properly now. We can get a clear understanding of the tasks that are required for it, the action steps we need to take, and what outcome the result will have. So it's another way to use the STAR method to forecast what a successful project can look like. Okay? And so that's actually how I use it in most cases, because I'm not doing a lot of interview anymore. Out of Scrum, they talk about plan, do, and act. And so I think that's an essential part of the process, and as a framework, I hope that sticks with you because it's a great way to sort of know, am I thinking about this project the right way? Some of you guys might be concerned with who's getting hired today. There's an author named Patrick Lenciani. He has a book called The Ideal Team Player, and this is who I'm hiring, and this is who a lot of folks in my business and in the community of peers, F100 companies are looking at is smart, hungry, and humble. So the idea here is that you become the kind of person that is smart. It means you have emotional intelligence. It means that you're looking and you're hungry to move forward. That's the hungry part, right? With accepting new scope, new roles, and you're not doing a whole lot of it's not my job, right? Because there's a whole lot of it's not my job out there. Those are definitely limitations to success. And then ultimately, in the end, it's humble people who don't necessarily need to get all the credit. I was not smart, hungry, humble in my 20s. I was very brute force, so the humility part was definitely lacking. I do think that I probably exhibited some of the smart aspects because I could read a room and I could understand what was going on with EQ, but nevertheless, I didn't have the total package then. So I would encourage you guys, this is what people are hiring. The recruiter is looking for these signals. And so you might just make a note, smart, hungry, humble, the ideal team player. Read that book in preparation to the ideal jobs that you want so that you can look like the ideal team player. This is something that I haven't really found taught anywhere except for in like spiritual Christian development. It's called vision, intention, and means. I've applied it with a lot of success over my career. And so I want to impart it to you because I've worked with MBAs and people out of like BCG and some of these other places where they have every framework, every model, they have everything you need to really analyze a business. But you can do it using them, not necessarily the technical models and all that, but you can assess really quickly, is this thing going to work? Can this thing take off? Can I resource it properly? So let me walk you through it real quick. So vision is something that's attainable, sustainable, and compelling. So you have to have something that meets those criteria. Intention is all your willful action. It's the things that you will do and you actually are doing, and therefore it's the things you won't be doing, right? So you have to say no to things to be intentional. And means is your time, talent, skills, and resources, everything you can put together to a project. So when I talk about VIM, and all my department managers and all my staffers know what VIM is. And so when I say, hey, you want to do this initiative in a call center with 30 people, it's going to affect all 30 people, and you want to do it in the next 30 days, what's the VIM on it? And so they'll be able to tell me, this is what we're chasing at a high level. These are the things we're going to do to support it at the intentional level. And then we have the time and talent because of our call volume today. We can actually support it. We can have these sidebar sessions, whatever else is happening. So you're able to really quickly calibrate what's going on and decide and act. And you can do that like in your weight loss journey, which I need to work on. You can do that basically anywhere. So VIM, if you just stick with one thing today, I'd love you to learn VIM in the sense that you can carry that forward in everything you do at home and at work with success. So, and I've certainly had a lot of success with using this model. And to be more clear, whenever I was in AmeriCommerce, I came in as essentially the chief operation officer, and I said, what are we trying to accomplish, right? So I wanted to get the V part right. And working that through with Ed Sturrock, we kind of got some clarity around that. And then I said, well, what are we going to do to support that goal, which was either get a large investment or get acquired. So that was sort of what we wanted to champion as the next step in the business. And then the means were all of our staff, but more importantly, what we could do to fund that activity. And I'm pleased to say with this particular model, in about 20 months, we had 3 Fortune 500 companies knocking on our door literally and inviting us through the acquisition process. And we were able to pick who our acquirer was. So great success story, but a really simple model that can really help you in a very profound way by being disciplined around it. I want to talk to you real quick about relationships. So Ed, I talked about Ed. Here's the thing I really want to share around relationships. It doesn't matter who you are and who you're connected to, just your name being known is already one push in the right direction, whether that's social media or it's because you did a lab together or because you worked on a project together, whatever else, right? That's one step in the direction of relationship building. But you really need to be the kind of person who is interested in those connections because you don't know what those connections are going to do over the next 10 years of your career. And what I mean by that is some people here are going to go to job number 1 and job number 2, and they're going to be useful to you in job number 3, right? And so you don't really know where that connection point is. But if you're the kind of person that's kind and you help build others up and you engage in others and you're helpful, then they're going to always remember you that you were the kind of person that wasn't a taker, but you were a giver. And so when your name comes back around for whatever reason, they'll say, you know what, that guy or that girl is the kind of person we're looking now. They'll be a good culture fit. Or, I don't know if they do this work, but I know in these projects they were real diligent and they got the work done. So Ed, I met 15 years ago. Turns out he knew my wife before she was my wife, and he vouched for me. And she was like, all right, well, maybe this guy's kind of smart. Completely snowed her. And so that was kind of her benchmark, was she wanted to be with a smart guy. And so we started talking in 1996. So Ed was connected to my wife, Renee. Likewise, I told you about the hurricane. I wound up coming back to AmeriCommerce, through a little acquisition, selling my clients to AmeriCommerce. Ed was a part of that process. And then ultimately I came back around to being in the company, and we led it through the acquisition. But through that process, I worked with Ed several times through that maybe 10 years, and we just never really lined up on a lot of things. But I was doing little projects for him, helping him out, because I wanted to, because I was interested. Then through the acquisition, I wound up coming in through Capital One. Another Hurricane Harvey hits. We got 3 feet of water in our house. We flooded. We moved to Austin. On the way to Austin, I made a Facebook post that basically said, Austin, here I come. That was the gist of it. Cameron saw that Facebook post, who knows Ed, who went to dance class with my wife, and she tells her husband, hey, this guy's coming to Austin, he's good people, you ought to interview him. His name's Joe. So that was her husband. Joe says, hey, I don't know who you are or what you do, but we don't need a banker, but I'd be happy to talk to you, because people always misunderstand what you do. So went and met with him, and then 3 months later, I was invited to be the chief product officer at FSG because of Joe, because of Cameron, because of Ed. So then I wound up basically restaffing the entire development team, and my lead architect was originally hired in AmeriCommerce, and he's now at FSG with me, and several others. So it's not that Ed is necessarily the linchpin hero in this story, it's that there's many people in my life that look like Ed, but this is such a salient story to tell that it's helpful to understand how people are connected and what that means to you over a long period of time. In this case, this was about a 15-year set of events that were in motion. So relationships matter, foster them, be a mentor to others, allow people to mentor you and speak into your life, whether that's professors or people that are further along. Foster those relationships so they can say, I know who this person is, that they can be connected to the next opportunity for you. So the next part of this is really to kind of focus on what are you becoming as a person. So as you go through this career arc of gaining skills and talents through your college degree, you then arrive at a place where you're ready for the world, so to speak, whether that's your startup or joining a company. We've already talked about the ideal team player, these kinds of things. The last part of it, and this is something that took me quite a while to understand, was it's not really just what I know. It's not the, hey, look at me, what I can do. It actually comes down to the kind of person I am. It's my character, it's my competence, it's my sense of values, and my vision. So I don't think that that's a very common understanding. Maybe you guys already know this, but those 4 dimensions are really important, because if you don't really have a clear vision of where you're going and you don't have values that help guide your decision making, you're going to drift and you're going to do all kinds of different things. And that swirl really comes to a place where you start to really think, well, maybe I'm not fit for this. And that's it's an identity question based on competencies. And there's a whole lot more to who you are as a person than your competencies. That's kind of the point. So I would make note of these 4 things working together to make you who you are and package yourself under these things. And if you haven't asked these questions yet, of what do I care about, what am I striving for, what is my vision, and what do I care about as a person, what are my values, then now would be a good time to start trying to sort those things out. And then as you do that, you start to realize how much you can align with other people with a similar vision or a similar set of values. And so if you've ever heard like Simon Sinek, Start With Why is his book, and he talks a lot about purpose in the sense of asking the question why. That's all related to the vision. People that have a strong why or strong vision resonates with other people, and they are attracted to that. Same thing is true with people with strong values. People resonate with values, or they run away from them, which is also good, right? So all those things are going to help you as you navigate the workforce and as you navigate the next opportunities, is to kind of package those things together. So for me, I take all this and I now come forward and I think, well, what's the one model that I kind of have left? And in my mind, that's what I call 3V leadership. So you've now had sort of all these little slides come together, but this is what I'm talking about today when I do my internal talks, is vision, values, and velocity. So I just summarize everything to these 3 steps, and I can just say, like, what is the vision? What are the decision-making criteria and our values? And how are we doing it as quickly as possible to create positive outcomes? So vision, values, and velocity. So that's my sort of shorthand measuring stick of how do you pull these things together in a way that help you stay aligned? Because if we're moving slow, weeks, months, then we don't have velocity, right? Then you can look back and say, well, if we're moving slow, then where are we swirling? Where are we having a difficult time? And that's usually in the values. That's your decision-making criteria. That's what's going on. Or it's in the vision. Don't know what we're doing. You got a lot of people sitting around not sure what to do. So this is an important aspect to me today as a leader. So if any of you guys are going into leadership, I might sort of tell you guys, you're looking for something that looks like this as you create business value for your customers and for your business. It's going to come in to looking something like this. Because you can't create high profit, you can't create new product lines, you can't do any of those things if these 3 things aren't in place. Because at some point you run out of runway, right? If you're not using your time wisely, it's not infinite funding, right? So that's a big part of my journey, and I hope that is helpful to you. The last part of this is sort of the Twitter or the blog post style, like the 7 top things. But I'll make your life great. So I'll just tell you, this is actually really very biographic. These things are actually very illustrative of who I am today. And so naturally I want to project myself on all you fine folks. But I think that in 20 years, the success I've really had has come from caring about the customer first. My entire life has been in service of the customer. Even when I was a kid, I was mowing yards, and my first little product was an address finder, so the guy, Domino's pizza driver at 10 o'clock at night to find your house. So I did all these little things because I just understood what a customer cared about. And now I'm 42 years old and I still care about the customer. I'm trying to understand. So when our sales are sluggish, or when our sales calls don't go well, or when our business is struggling, I run to the customer. What's happening? What's going on with our business? Because it's customer money that pays our payroll. It's customer money that funds our new ideas. It's customer money who builds that software. It's customer money who tells us the best parts of our recruiting strategies and all that kind of stuff to find the people that the customer want to talk to. So a lot of emphasis on the customer. And as I mentioned this earlier, but it turns out I love people. Not everybody loves people, so I recognize that. But if you don't love people, be helpful. Because if you can help people get where you want to go, they're going to help you get, or if you can help them get where they want to go, you're going to be helped going where you want to go. So that's an important part, just be helpful. And I think I see a lot today where people are very siloed, they're very inward, they're doing a lot of look at me, look what I can do, and not enough, how can I help you? How can I give you some of my time, some of my talent? How can I give you some of that encouragement that you need? And I think that's an important part. Everybody's in sales and marketing. If you don't think so, I'm just going to wag my head at you. Everybody's in sales and marketing. If you have kids, you're selling your kids on what to watch and what not to watch. If you're in any kind of a volunteer organization, you're selling them on why this idea is better than that idea, or you've seen it before. So become the kind of person who understands the principles of sales, which ultimately are the principles of communication, so that you can help people get where they want to go through sales and marketing, which is clear communication. Bet on yourself. Be the kind of person who takes on hard challenges and believes enough in yourself to do the hard work, and don't give up early, right? Be the kind of person that can persevere through the hardship and the challenges, because remember the little swirly blob of stuff at the beginning, it's always hard. It's never going to be easy. So if you're expecting it to be a quick win, it's just rarely it is. And so be the kind of person that is prepared for that and to persevere, and never stop learning. I know it's hard right now in the university setting. You have a lot of stuff you have to read and keep up with. But as soon as you move on from this, don't walk away from books. Don't walk away from professional development. You need to continue to read. If you're in business, you want to read the business classics. If you're on the progressive, innovative side, you want to see what's happening in the marketplace that's changing so you can consume that. Because what you bring in through your eyes and ears is what you become. And the same thing with the friends that are around you. The people that you put around you is what you will become. That's not cliche. That's just because people are going to inspire you to move in a direction that they're already going. So if you want to go somewhere, you got to get in a group that are going where you want to go, right? And so that's a big part of it. So anyway, that concludes sort of my lecture talk thing. I guess ask any questions that you may have. Is there anybody that has a shout out concern? We'll address them. Stunned silence. Yes. Red hat.
You talk about taking chances to bet on yourself. How do you recommend that we go about taking chances when we get out of school?
So, do you mean how to get started, or how to get the right ideas to start with?
How to get the right ideas to get started with, how to get that vision.
Yep. So one of the things that you guys have right now is theoretically a peer group of people that you can sort of join to work with together. So to collaborate on something together is ideal in the early stage, because then you can have the wisdom of multiple counselors, right? So I would say if you can do it with 2 or 3 people, that's better than doing it by yourself. That's a little antithetical to the typical scrappy startup who's like, I did it all by myself, I got the app done, I used Fiverr marketing, I used the Amazon Marketplace and all that kind of stuff. But there's a pathway to success there if you can do it all and you're willing to. But to your question, I would find a couple of like-minded people who want to solve a real problem that actually exists, because either you know it exists, or your wife does it exist, or your friend, or your whatever, and go chase those problems in service to the customer. If you can't find problems to solve for the customer, you don't have a business, right? Because it's customer money. So that's sort of what you need to angle on, is what's the real problem that you can articulate, usually in 1 or 2 sentences, that somebody can shake their head and say, yes, I have that problem, will you help me with it? That would be where you want to put your energy if you're in a startup mode. The days of thinking, I'll just build a platform and I'm going to get 500,000 customers on my platform and then I'm going to sell it, those are the unicorn experiences. Don't ever recommend that, right? Now, if you can find a tightly scoped product that solves this one thing, like In the beginning, I had the little address marker, and it was specifically scoped for the Domino's pizza guy. That's how I pitched it. And I sold it for $20 because most people had a 20 in their pocket. This was before we had Venmo and PayPal and all this stuff. And I literally carried it up there, 14 years old, rang the doorbell and said, "Don't you hate it when the Domino's pizza guy's driving around your neighborhood and you see him when your pizza's cold? Buy this for $20 and it has your address on it. They'll find your house quicker." That's a clear problem to solve, right? Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next. Somebody over here was daring enough to.
Well, I was gonna ask you about, I think you missed your have a clear vision and purpose in your little sharing of ideas as your final tip.
Yeah, so would you like me to elaborate on that?
I would.
Okay, thank you. I'll give you the $10 like I promised. Okay, so,
15?
no. Deal was already made.
Oh,
Okay, so, and I actually did talk about unique point of view. So I think it's really important, these kind of these go together. So the gentleman in the back who asked about where do we focus to get an idea started, you need to be the kind of person with a point of view. So that means you kind of need to stand for something. You need to have some ideas that are important enough to you to keep you motivated. I want to talk to you really briefly about the tragic idea of follow your heart, the passion side of this, because your heart is a really lousy guide. Not saying that you shouldn't be passionate about things, but if you let only passion guide you, it's going to guide you in a place that is all about you. It's all about how you feel. And there needs to be a lot more than how you feel about it, because you need to be driven. And that goes to vision and purpose. So if you understand sort of where you're going, I like to think about vision as, for me personally, what is the wrong I want to right? And so that helps me think about vision in a new way, because as I try to think about what really matters, I know vision needs to be attainable, sustainable, and compelling. Those three dimensions are important. So that's not lost on me. But I tend to think about the rally cry. What is the wrong I want to right? Because somebody needs to champion a change, and that's a transformation effort. And that vision has to be strong enough that other people say, yes, I want that to change too, right? That's hard. So that vision really in the sense of a rally cry of what's the wrong you want to right. In the business that I started or joined 2 years ago, the wrong I needed to right was the difficulty of using smart building software in an environment where everybody was being trained in a residential and personal setting, that apps were easy and that this should be easy. So the wrong I needed to right was enterprise software that was super hard to use, it was clunky because it was made in the 80s, okay? So that was the wrong I needed to right from a technology standpoint. In the business, culturally, the wrong I needed to right was people that were acting like rock stars, lone wolves, and they were siloed. So the wrong I needed to right was communication, teamwork, collaboration, moving with velocity, right? So that's vision. Purpose, though, is ultimately the thing that is motivating you to make it through the hardship. So in the very beginning, we talked about that slide with all the pitfalls and the valleys and the lakes and all that stuff. That's where the purpose has to come forward. And if you have a strong vision that's anchored on a line, a real problem, the rally cry problem, then your purpose will keep you moving because that vision is compelling enough to do that, which is the benchmark of why it's attainable, sustainable, and compelling. Thank you. Yes.
Could you give an example in your career where maybe you had to change like a business strategy or maybe like a vision and have it, you have like communicate that with your team and like give a step in how you're gonna change that, whether it be like customer base or whatever, acquiring new thing, acquiring new innovations, like how would you go about it?
How do you communicate a new vision and get people to respond to it? So in a business setting, at AmeriCommerce, we were successful, we were profitable, we were growing, but growing slowly at 10 years. So the challenge there was, and ultimately that's why we decided we either needed a very large investment or we needed to move into an acquisition story. But it couldn't just be, it could be a sort of a half step. And it could be a half step investment or a half step acquisition. So as we started to think through that process, what we really first looked at was anybody that's going to come in from the outside at that level means it's not friends and family. It's not somebody that we can just sort of bulldoze them in a loving way. We actually have to validate it. We have to be able to prove it and articulate it. So the first thing that I did in that particular case was I said we have to transform the way we talk about ourselves because we talk like insiders. And that means you have to be a developer or an e-commerce person to understand what we're talking about. And we're projecting that on all of our prospects and customers, which means they have to understand it at that level too. So in the first, 6 months, 9 months, We completely overhauled our brand, our communication strategy, how we reference the core features, and we stopped talking about, and it does this, and it does this, and it does this, and you can do that too, and it works for this person, and it works for that person. And we scoped it all down to, if you're a power user who has more than one e-commerce store, this platform is going to change your life. And so we simplified what that core message was. That rally cry around how do we communicate ourselves externally became how do we communicate ourselves internally, which then turned into our sales guys got to be sharper, our service center has to be sharper, they have to be using these words, they have to be helpful in this process. And frankly, the big thing that we worked on that part of the vision casting was, this is customer money. That was something we talked about the first year. Everything that we were trying to do is we were saying, this is customer money. This is customer money. The reason we're doing this with the phone system is because it's customer money that pays for it, so it has to benefit the customer. The reason we're changing the website and the way it looks and our enrollment is for the customer. And so through that process, it was a lot of communication, a lot of clarifying of what our intent was. It was using VIM, vision, intention, and means. But now to answer your question after all that context, clarity, 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 clarity. It just comes back over and over, and the vision is all about providing clarity to your team members. And if they don't understand, they're not going to really respond to that rally cry. And about the time you think you've said it a million times is the time they're finally hearing it. Yes?
Yeah, could you just elaborate on the point you made in the earlier slides when you said creativity is found in the constraints? And like, I know money is a constraint, but like, what other constraints that you had to deal with in your work experience that you had to use creativity?
Yes, sir. So there's a few things around that. One is when your wife tells you you can't work 100 hours anymore, that's a constraint. Okay? So she says, hey, Justin, you have to figure out how to make this work. In 90 hours, 80 hours, 70 hours, get to a 50-hour work week, that's a constraint. Money is obviously a constraint. One of the reasons why great developers are so great is because it's not that they're hackers, and maybe they're genius, right? But it's really because they're typically lazy. So their constraint is they want to do more in 20 or 30 hours than anybody else does. So that's a constraint, right? Is that time application. And so creativity found in constraints is really, that context applies to the environment, it applies to your customer base, it applies to your team. And so, for example, if you're trying to rally a team, but you have BAU, business as usual, that you have to do, and you also need to create level up strategies, but you can't get people to work overtime, now you have a constraint, right? How do I create transformation in an environment where we can't spend more time, we can't let go of all of our business as usual, and yet we have to have some sort of a 2.0 thing happen, right? That's when you start saying, okay, where can I succeed here? In my case, I would start catering lunches, and I would start putting people in their lunch breaks, and I'd feed them pizza and other things, so I could do my 5 hours over 5 days through a lunch setting, and I would frame that in the form of a spike. And I'd say, look, we're going to spike on this. I'm not going to ask you to work 50 hours this week, but I'm going to ask you to give me your lunchtime. I know it's important to you. Work with me, though, because I think on the other side of this 5 hours, collectively, we're going to spend 100 man hours on this process, and we're going to come out better because of it. Right? So that would be creativity and a constraint. Is that a useful answer to you, or do you want something else?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Yes?
So I might have misunderstood, but earlier in your presentation, you seemed to create a dichotomy between sales and marketing and operations. My experience is that both of them need to happen together. The operations guy that forgets the customer is a fool.
Yeah.
And the sales and marketing people that don't have the discipline of the operations person put all their hope in their heart
Yeah.
and get nowhere. Could
Perfect.
you please comment?
Yes. So what I was encouraging you guys to know is what side of that you fit on. Because if you're in operations, you have to be very disciplined and you have to be rigorous. And if you're on the sales side, you can cover sins with growth and profit. Okay? They have to live together. So to your point, it's not that one is better than the other, but they are very different. And I will tell you that if you put all your hope in a sales and marketing guy and you let the rest of the business run in that context, it will certainly fall apart, because you need somebody who is detail oriented, you need somebody that's structured, who's going to measure the numbers, do the metrics. And a sales guy's going to tell you why he didn't hit the numbers. He's going to tell you why marketing didn't do what they needed, and he's going to have all those things. It just is part of the process. On the other hand, though, in a heavy operations or engineering environment where almost everybody is in an operations mindset, there's no growth, right? So then you have to rely on growth hacking, right? Which turns into like, well, we're going to outsource to our ad agency, we're going to outsource to, you know, the growth hacker types to do all this marketing and sales stuff because we don't do that here. We're rigorous, we're very operation minded. And then what happens is a lot of the soul of the business is outsourced. And so then what happens in your messaging, your public facing messaging gets distorted, it turns into blog posts, it turns into tweets, and somebody forgets what the core business is because you're over there in operations land, not communicating the vision, not driving the business, and I'm not articulating all that, pointing it at you. But so you need those two worlds to live together in harmony. And the way to do that, for example, is to use something like Scrum, where you have cross-functional teams that are talking together. They're all on sprints, and so you have operations people and sales people all knowing what matters for the next week or 4 weeks or whatever that sprint is. And everybody can say, I'm going to put my ego aside because if the business says getting tight on inventory, getting tight on our AR and AP is what's most important, even though I'm a sales guy, I don't have to take this business trip yet. I can push it off 1 week and I can do a video conference and I can do my next step in the sales process 2 weeks from now instead of doing all those steps, for example. So they work together. Thank you for reading that. No? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When you unexpectedly and suddenly found yourself at $50,000 in debt, obviously dealt with it some way. Can you give us some insight into that?
Truthfully, I prayed. I said, God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm way too old at this point. I've got 2 kids. There's something here that I'm missing. What am I missing? And as I thought about that and through that process, I realized, well, first thing I have to do is I have to surrender some of my ego that says I'm building this big empire and I've got all these employees and all this stuff. And so I had to turn that into action, right? And part of that action was to not be passive about the debt and say, I'll figure it out. It'll work itself out over time. And instead, I actually went and I wound up terminating 3 people right away. Not because that's the answer to all problems, but that was cost containment, and part of our problem was coming out of that. And one of the reasons why about $70,000 of that $100,000 happened was in a person's decisions on how they would communicate information, where I was, in Scrum terms, you would call it chicken or pig. I was the pig. So I was all in, and it didn't matter what he said to anybody but me, because I was the financing group. And so basically his context, his feedback, put me in a decision-making context that wasn't real, and I made poor decisions as a result of poor information. So I was like, you gotta go, right? So once that was done, I kind of stopped the bleeding, and then I went to all my customers, and I basically said, here's the deal. These people who you're used to working with are in jeopardy. They're no longer here, but I value you as a customer, and because I do, I mean, that's how I approach my business. So I told them what was going on, and we worked out plans together that could still have them be successful in my new constraints, creativity and the constraints of trying to now manage the $100,000 in debt. So I looked at upsell strategies, and I literally asked them, what else can I do for you? What else would you let me do? I already know your business, I already know your strategies, I've already done the time with you, leverage that time for the next thing. Another part of it was, quite frankly, I started looking for another job. I tried to look for what really could be done to change my position in my situation. And then I obviously worked with my wife on strategies at home of what we could do to sacrifice some things. And through that process, I also started doing some volunteer time and some other things because I recognized that I was so insulated that it was all about me, and I needed to start giving back. And so in about 19 months, we overcame that $100,000 debt, but it was through a lot of hard, intentional work, and a lot of it was work of the heart too, not just financial work. I had to change some things in me. So, but yeah, a lot of it was disciplined business work too. Yes.
I wanted to ask you that 20 years ago, MIS as a discipline was only 30 years old. So what made you choose MIS when the discipline was so young and not go for computer science as a developer or sales and marketing were your passions? How did you end up with MIS?
I don't think I was good enough for computer science, so that was one constraint. Mechanical engineering, EE, all that stuff. So that's one reason. It wasn't an area that I could thrive in, I think. I think another part of that is my dad was a successful entrepreneur, and he told me when I was 12 or 13 years old that I wouldn't take over the family business, which was in oil and gas. And I would have been the 3rd generation owner of the business. And I'd already done stuff inside the business as odd jobs and things like that. So I definitely thought, I could see that in my future. So once that happened, I said, well, if my dad's not going to, give me the path, then I have to create my own path. And he asked me at 12 or 13 years old, what do you care about? And at that time, I had an early computer. It was 1992 or 93, and I was using AOL, CD-ROMs, and all that kind of stuff. And I was on message boards. I didn't realize it then, but I was very tech savvy for that period of what we were going through in technology. And so I realized I wanted to do something in technology. That was 100% clear. And by the time I made it into university, I was already building websites. And so 1996 is when I built my first website. And that's when I realized, wow, I can make a real impact here. And so then I began to look for where could that get fostered. And I actually had sort of a web-first view. And MIS was the clearest path to a web-first sort of point of view. But that was not a common thought process at that time because we were still talking about Cisco routers and there was a lot of physical layer stuff. But I also was comfortable with that. And so that's sort of how I gravitated to MIS was the physical layer and sort of the web-first point of view. And frankly, I had Lamar folks telling me, wow, you're already building websites? Like, that's great. Well, then it's either this or it's this. And I already knew that I wanted to run a business, and so that put me in the college business.
So you had the other AmeriCommerce guy as your classmate in MIS?
Ed, yep,
Yeah,
that's right.
he was?
Ed was, yes.
Oh.
So I met Ed my first year of university, and in fact, he had built a little app for his little t-shirt business at the time, and I was talking about what I was doing, and so we kind of knuckle bumped, or whatever the thing was, maybe with peace, I don't know. But we were like, yo, bro, that's cool. And so Ed and I became fast friends because at that time, there were not really a lot of us who were championing the cause. And so while there were a lot of people going through the classes, my peers, like if this would have been an MIS group at that time in 1997, 98, there would have been a lot of people who were like, I don't really want to build web pages. Like, I'm doing it because I have to, but I don't really want to, right? So that was kind of a challenging
Very
time.
early stages of e-commerce, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Very early stages of e-commerce.
Yeah, in the early stages of e-commerce, and I actually built a content management system. Yeah, HTML. I built a content management system in 1999 before WordPress. That was multi-language support, and I had several local customers here using that system. But it was way ahead of its time, and I didn't know what I had. It's kind of like having a Lamborghini and driving it around town like it's a Honda Civic. I just didn't know because there was no manual for it, right? So I think a lot of times, had I not been in Beaumont, in a way, like because of the community, there was nobody telling me how precious this thing was. And so I was just sort of brute forcing my way through it at that time. Now today, the community that's here would foster that environment really well, and you guys would succeed. Plus, you guys don't know how to reach me now, so that would be one advantage, right?
Thank
But that's how I chose MIS, and I'm happy with that.
Thank
So thank you, Lamar.
All right, thanks for Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.